Raven Project is brought to you by Big Time, Attract, Develop, Grow.
That means what I think it means. We're in trouble.
Case IH, Rethink Productivity.
Dear Lord in heaven.
Hawk Optics, Vision Accomplished.
What a Sam Hill.
Deer Grow, better food plots, bigger deer. Scentlock, the most effective whitetail gear ever made.
Better find myself some camouflage.
You know, this place, unlike a lot of places out there, it had zero bedding cover whenever we bought it. And one of the first things that I noticed is we need to thicken some places up. We need to create some bedding. And one of the best ways I know to do that is by hinge cutting. You know, hinge cutting is super effective to be able to go into small pockets where you feel like either deer are already bedding or where they should be bedding. You know, in most cases here, what we're looking for is we're going on the upwind side of a lot of our food plots and trying to find south-facing or east-facing slopes, gradual slopes. Maybe it's a gradual point that runs out, whatever it might be, somewhere where deer would naturally bed. And then we're going in and making 2 to 4 acre hinge cuts and creating bedding where there wasn't originally bedding. This place was big mature timber, wide open timber. You could look down through the timber and see 150 or 200 yards. And when you can do that, deer use it, but they're not living there. They're not staying there. And that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to create a place to where deer are living 24/7, 365 days a year. And sometimes you got to manipulate what you have to make that happen. And that's what we're doing by hinge cutting. So what we got here is we're about 100, maybe 125 yards off the back end of this food plot. And I picked this particular spot because it's a ridge that runs off gradually right here with a big point out on the end of it, and it's south facing. So that's what I'm looking for when I look, you know, start looking from the food plot to the topo in relation to the food plot. We're on the upwind side of where we'll be hunting. So we're probably, like I said, 125 yards off. So that gives us enough buffer to where the bedding starts that we can access in and out of the food plot, in and out of the stand without being in the line of sight of where these deer are going to be bedding. And whenever I come in here, you know, instead of just piling a bunch of stuff up all together, what I'll try to do is pick individual clumps and just spread them out every, you know, 10, 15 yards and almost treat it like you have the center of a wagon hub. So a lot of times when people go in to do hinge cutting, they're literally going in, cutting trees and just matting them over on top of each other and just creating the thickest, nastiest cover that you possibly can. And what I found over the years that actually works best is I'll go in and cut individual little pods. So I might cut 5 or 6 trees in a group, lay them over kind of like a, you know, I treat it almost like a wagon spoke, to where I kind of have a hub, and then I'll lay a tree out several different directions, giving a deer the ability to bed in a lot of different places depending on the wind and being able to see and smell. So, and then I might skip 20 or 30 yards and do another one. And what I've found over the years by doing that is you can spread deer out by doing that and be able to hold a lot more deer in a smaller area. We're taking a 4 acre or so spot right here, and we're really skipping around and hitting just little pods and making different little bedding areas, you know, kind of almost micro bedding areas inside this large bedding area. And what that does is, like I said, it'll make you house a lot more deer in a smaller area than going in and just cramming stuff on top of each other in a small spot. You'll notice I'm cutting them just about right around belly button height. And what that does, and I'm cutting them about 2/3 if I can through, and that's gonna keep them alive, keep the foliage going. And then also the height is keeping them falling pretty much parallel with the ground. So you're gonna get all that browse, easy browse for the deer, and then plus have a lot of cover to bed against as well. So that's about the right height, I feel like, for hinge cutting. And I'm really targeting, I'm trying to target hickory the most. We got some oaks that we are cutting in here too, just because this part of the country, the majority of our stuff is marketable timbers, oak and hickory and everything else, but we're trying to lay off the oaks as much as we can, target the hickories, and hopefully this is gonna be a sweet little bedding area. I love this spot right here because what it is it's a south running point that comes off of that food plot up there. But it's a pretty gradual little point right here, fairly flat on top and fairly wide. So there's a lot of cover up here and a lot of bedding, and should be able to, you know, once we get 3 or 4 acres done, it should be able to house a bunch of deer up in here. You know, that's the beauty about hinge cutting. It don't matter if you're working on a 1,000-acre farm or a 30-acre farm. You can manipulate these deer, put bedding cover where you want it, and manipulate these deer to do what you want them to do.
The Raven Project is brought to you by Grizzly Coolers, adventure guaranteed for a lifetime.
Precisely.
Hooeyman, your land, your legacy.
We're not out of the woods yet, son.
Hunt Stand, hunt like a pro. Baker Implement, trusted equipment of the Raven Project.